Troubled. An empathy stirs in troubled water, so disturbed my soul. And deep in ravines beneath the ocean, all peace, yet still I cannot sleep. Upon Mirror Lake I see etched the roughs of time. There upon highest mountain I cannot find the strength to climb, for bleakest, blackest ocean roars with woes. Upon deepest midnight water crash waves upon rocks far from home. Yet in this froth, spume and white, I cannot turn to spite. My heart, all red and pumping, attempts to guide me back from anxiety to panic attack. I live in valleys of fear and hide my face with shame, for 'tis but a mind of madness that bringeth the thunder and the rain. Chocolate. The sublime ebony of the truffle grown, found in the woods, patiently prepared with slender gloves on trays of sugar delights. Such is life when chocolate comes in all brands. We nibble delightedly, tasting freedom and gluttony, even the dark bitter still sweet, and some people's favourite treat. Once the sun has risen, and the day has begun, life itself has become chocolate. The diamond doors opened. She stood there marvelling, for there stood a box of milk tray. Upon a silver fountain, champagne spurted in frothy tips, yellow as gold, and small silver trays of caviar. She stepped forward and tentatively picked up a spoon. It was both creamy, crunchy, and velvety at the same time. She tipped a fluted crystal glass into the fountain. The champagne tingled on her taste buds, frothy and tender. She reached for the chocolate, but that was too much. She had been so distracted by the luxury she did not notice a chamber with mirrors on all sides. Through one of the mirrors stepped a man. Slender in build, his skin was ruddy, and he sported a red beard. His robes were orange, and his smile, well, was sublime. "Who are you?" she said guiltily, her mouth full of chocolate. He pulled the orange hood from his eyes, which were as blue as the skies, his smile reflected in them. "Well, good question, and a good question deserves a good answer. I am the saint." She blushed slightly as somehow this man reminded her of the chocolate she was eating. A flash of anger passed across his eyes, and guiltily she dropped the box of chocolate she had finished onto the floor. His eyes hardened, yet they still showed humour, and something else, regret. He sighed. "Did you have to eat all the chocolate? You could have saved me some. Well, time you paid the price of greed and lack of control, you will know the maze of crystals. First you must choose your looking-glass." She was still guiltily licking the sticky fingers. She wiped her fingers on her dress and concentrated. She looked down. Her tattered rags had turned into a glorious deep blue dress, with a jewelled strap and pink butterflies with silver wings encrusted on the silk. The saint sniffed appreciatively, and her scent was that of flowers and butterflies and reeds in the sea breeze. "That's better. Look in the mirrors. Each leads to a different path. Choose wisely, for each reflection is slightly different, each an aspect of you dark and light. Challenge is." Here he looked to one side and whispered in her ear. His whiskers tickled pleasantly. "Find the master within yourself." She looked surprised. "Not the mistress." "You are the mistress, the master of yourself. It is the master you must find." The master, she muttered, admiring her reflection in the first mirror. She looked pretty, Alice a little tubby, but kind of cute and sweet. She smiled prettily at her reflection. She turned around. The saint smiled, showing small wet teeth. She laughed, a puppy dog smile. "That one is easy. Vanity." The saint bowed his head. "Well done." The next mirror was not so flattering. "Self-esteem." He nodded. "The next." He eyed the chocolate box and kicked it absent-mindedly. She smiled. "The master." And raising one foot, she stepped through the looking-glass. It had been her eyes. They were full of steel. She stepped quietly into a dark and stone-hinged chamber. In the centre was a wooden table. People were standing arguing and were handing each other pieces of meat being cut from a beast on the table. They cut off slender, tender slices with steely knives, and drunk wine, deep red. They too had steely eyes. The man who sat quietly at the head of the table said in a low voice, "Join us. We are all masters here." The Jedi Messiah. She sat talking pensively. Her nails were broken and her shirt was torn. Her face stained with invisible tears of harlequin. Her life was black, tattered rags she had kept hidden under false glamour and piercing eyes. Yet those rags she had patiently sewn together and worn, expecting one day for a handsome prince to take her to the ball. Yet life is not a fairy tale. There would be no handsome prince, but her eyes were now magical. She could see long distances, faraway galaxies and planets. With ebony hands and white gloves she could mix potions and spells. She could walk with gods. A small insect in the grass of life, in a microscope on the cosmos. Yet her pain ran so deep that rivers of blood washed her soul with burning ashes, and she wreathed and fell and cried out for help. "Someone help me!" Yet all she became was a butterfly, living but for one day in glory and beauty, yet only destined to be caught in a net and put in a collector's box. The butterfly catcher caught her in the net, and wriggling round she secretly escaped through a tiny hole, and with delighted laughter escaped into the night sky. She would live and forever remain a butterfly. Yet now her wings were dark as night, and she giggled in glee. She became human again, and stood in tattered rags, black as a crow. There amongst the desert pyramids lay the maze of crystals. She walked to a tree, and with a cloth hand pulled off the twigs and broke off a staff. She stood tall and pulled a hood down to cover her face. She walked quietly towards the diamond doors, glancing nervously to each side. Something moved behind her, light feet. She turned around, sweeping her staff from side to side, feet glued to the ground in fear. "Who goes there?" Sniffling laughter. Out from behind a red berry bush stepped a dark figure, stick-thin, with a scarecrow's face and a sinful grin. Slowly he reached out and tore the berries from the bush. "You cannot enter," he cried, voice long and thin. He broke off a branch and swept his staff in a circle. The evil eye appeared, scratched in the dust. Suddenly the diamond doors disappeared, and instead were long dark corridors of pain that seemed to have no end. And patches of poppies were on the wall. Every night was empty, and every day was pain. Once a week a door opened, and the scarecrow sat there still. They spoke long. He threatened her with oblivion. She loved him. Then the corridors began again. Cold water and Gestapo torture. As the blood ran red down her leg, her womb ached with heaviness, the heaviness of life. One day, once she had loved him enough, the doors opened and bright sunshine met her empty step. Her eyes hypnotized with pain and her spirit broken. She walked back to the houses, but pain was her addiction that nothing could repair. They showed her to a cold cell. One hard bed, a glass of water stood on a dim windowsill. She took the glass, broke it, and cut her throat. As she sawed away with the broken glass, she found tears mixing with the blood and could not do it. She covered the wound with bloody rags and stumbled out the door. Bright sunshine met her eyes, and she stumbled and fell. A dog, gentle, full of peace, noticed her blood spilling on the pavement. He took her home, fed her honey and jam, and patiently licked her wounds. "Animals don't go to hell," she murmured sleepily, and awoke to see a dark face above her. The dog smiled and frolicked around with delighted laughter and puppy tails. They ate bread and jam and sunbathed on the terrace naked. The dog would protect her always and be her friend, but she was to keep this life on one basis only. She was only ever to drink water, except to catch a scarecrow. Wednesday. That Wednesday, the slamming of the door, I could take no more. Wild my broodmare upon the moors, as she tosses her head and lifts her tail high. Why is the sky deep like crystal, yet I am so small? And yes, we know so little. As will-o'-the-wisp I saw her fly, and in hot pursuit my horse I kicked, pounding of hooves and cracking of sticks. There she stood in the clearing, her long blonde hair white, her dress of green, her slender willow fine delight. And she laughed, fairy-tongued. I dismounted and led my white mare, for she smiled at me and stood there, and upon open palm lay an acorn. We planted the seed and spoke long, long, long evening sun, of shallow lights and evening bees. We spoke of magic, earth and trees.